What if I told you that most of DoorDash's customers are not the ultra wealthy? You would think so, given how much in fees that they charge and how much of an extra premium it is to get your restaurant food delivered to your front doorstep. However, and I don't have any scientific data or any corporate data to prove this, but I just have my own personal experience in a town in Minnesota that kind of borders the edge of the Twin Cities metropolitan area, but is also kind of exurban in its own right. So I would call my area kind of large in scope, bordering suburban / semi-rural, because many of the homes in this area that are delivered to are of that nature. But you also have a fair number of them in town here as well. So I would say that the demographics of the customer base fall into a small handful of categories, and I'll go through them one by one. The first one and the lowest one on the economic scale are your public housing recipients and mobile home residents. And this one's always kind of befuddling because you don't think that a lot of these people have the money to pay for this type of service, but they do it anyway. Now, to be fair, some of them probably take advantage of some restaurant deals. A lot of your chain restaurants, such as Taco Bell, McDonald's, etc., do have specials on deliveries and being able to, if you order a certain amount of food, that you don't have to pay a delivery fee. And I'm sure that is the reason why you get a lot of orders from these particular areas, because a lot of my orders in those locations tend to be McDonald's and similar fast food establishments. And so, that said, it's really tough for me to say this, but a lot of the people who are in these situations, because they spend more money than they need to on this type of a service, they're likely to stay that way. And I speak this as an apartment dweller myself. A lot of these people have nicer apartments than I do, and of course I work full-time for a Big Four bank, and I don't make a small amount of money, but I don't make enough to really massively support a number of people either. I do okay for myself, but that's beside the point. Anyway, those people too, the public housing folks tend to have nicer accommodations than I do, especially when it comes to amenities. Because my building is pretty much a brownstone, there's not really any amenities here of any kind, and so that's kind of, it's really basic, and so, but I'm okay with it because the town that I live in is very good, and so that's group number one. Group number two is an interesting one as well. We have a very large number of senior, like nursing homes, maybe even somewhat just assisted living homes here, and the people who spend on these delivery services in those particular facilities have money, and I think they have they have a good amount of money saved up. I've talked to a couple of them. They have fairly prosperous pasts, but they're confined to these facilities for medical reasons, and so. But I believe that these people have enough money that they can continue to do this without much concern for their future or necessarily outliving their money. So my town here has at least 2 of them in town here, and there are 3 of them in neighboring towns up the road from here. And so if I go about 7 to 12 miles to the northeast, I'll find a couple of those as well, and they'll have me deliver 1 or 2 Chipotle items up there. And so these are people who have a fair amount of money stored away. They maybe have 5 to 15 years left to live, and they're going to go out as comfortably as they possibly can. Obviously, I don't think anybody should have a problem with this by any stretch of the imagination. They've lived and worked and been productive their entire lives, and I believe they've earned the right to do this. So those people actually can constitute a decent percentage of the orders here, and but not quite as many as that first group. The third group that we're talking about here are your basic, very middle of the road, average middle class residents. This town is constituted mainly of these particular types. This is a lakefront town, and it has, as you've seen from some of my past episodes, has some very nice lakefront homes. But the number of DoorDash deliveries to these areas is fairly low. Those lakefront higher end homes, and again, we don't have very many of them, but most of our homes in the core town are very middle class, very average type of homes. This is where the bread and butter of the business is for food delivery in this town. But these people are busy, and they don't necessarily always have time to cook. And as a matter of fact, neither do I. But again, but these people are not ordering every night of the week either. These people might be doing it once or twice a week tops. And it usually involves pizza or some sort of family meal. These are homes, with children, nuclear families. And so they have, 2 incomes, 2 jobs. And so there are just going to be nights where they're not going to have enough time or energy to cook a full meal at home. Although judging by the short looks I've had in some of their kitchens, they're capable of it the rest of the time. So these people use these services in a pinch to be able to basically just save some energy. If they have dual incomes and they're both commuting to and from the city, or in our case the cities, for work, you do what you gotta do. The fourth and final group are the rural customers. These are the people who want the convenience of the restaurants. And I live in a town of about 20,000 residents, but it's the restaurant hub of about a 300 square mile region. These are the people who live 5 to 20 miles out, and they want their local favorites here at home. And many of these homes are agricultural, and from the judging by the looks of their properties, I think they're salted earth, hardworking people who just occasionally want the convenience of their local favorite in-town meals without having to come all the way into town to get it and bring it back. And that is the fourth group. And this fourth group doesn't exist in many places. It only exists, in places like this, which are on the outer fringes of a major metropolitan area. And by outer fringe, I mean outer fringe. This is the type of place where much of the land surrounding us is agricultural. And so these places, I'm talking about, crop farms. Horse farms are very common here. These are people who work very hard training horses, for example. And they can't blame people who work that hard for wanting to have, not wanting to have to come all the way into town here for the favorite restaurant. And by restaurant, I don't mean chain restaurants. All these people will pick up some of the local food. We have 2 predominant Mexican restaurants here, for example. Again, non-chains. These are the places that people like to come into town to eat. They may come into town to go to Applebee's. They may come into town occasionally to go to places like that for casual type of restaurant service. But the ones that they really come into, they really order from here are the local names. So there you have it, a short primer on the typical DoorDash customer base. It is not your ultra wealthy by any means. These are the hardworking individuals, people who just don't have time to be cooking meals 5 days a week, of which I'm one of. And these are just some observations from myself personally here on the outer fringes of the Twin Cities and the metropolitan area. So, with that said, hope you found that a little interesting. It's a little bit different than what I usually have. I think I'll be back to the normal historical stuff tomorrow. But for now, hope you had a good Monday. We'll see you tomorrow on Tuesday. And as always, peace out, homies.